Okay, now that we've discussed the basics of a meta table and the meta method, let's see this in action so we can actually understand how these things work. It's really hard to understand meta tables and meta methods at a high level without seeing it put into use. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a table that is going to have some specialized behavior that's going to basically override that addition operator. So we're going to make a sort of string that we're going to call superstring, and its concatenation is going to work with a plus. If you've used other programming languages where you could do something like this, you probably found it a little bit weird that in Lua you have to do it like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a class called superstring, and we're basically going to add the ability to do concatenation with the plus instead of with this dot dot. So let's go ahead and create this file. We're just going to save this as, we're going to call this superstring demo.lua. And inside here, we're going to start off by creating a meta table. So we're going to do a local variable, meta, and we're going to set this equal to just an empty table. And then we're going to do a local SS is what we're going to call this for superstring, and we're going to make this be our table. That's the table that we're going to use to create our superstrings. It's going to not quite be a class at this point. It's just going to be a table that we're going to use to create other tables that's going to define the meta table for them. A little bit later on, we're going to create more of a robust class, but maybe you could think of this as a primitive sort of class in Lua. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a function on our SS called new. And if you think about what's happening here, the syntax might be a little bit confusing because we're saying ss.new. But remember, this is the same thing as basically saying ss new equals, and then doing a function like this, and then putting it in here. This is just a shortcut, just like when we had declared functions before where we didn't have this in front of it. It was the same thing as assigning it to a global variable. This is the same thing as assigning it to a key in our table. So there's two things I want to mention briefly before we move on. First of all, the function name new. You don't have to use the function name new if you don't want to. You could name this function whatever you want. But in Lua, typically we use new by convention for any function that's going to perform initialization on a new object when we're assigning the meta table, like you'll see in a minute here, and also when we take a more object-oriented approach and try to simulate classes in Lua. Secondly, the variable names are typically going to be determined by the scope. So what I mean by this is you might see a lot of single letter variable names in very short scoped areas of Lua. In our example here, we're just going to be using S to represent a string. If you've used a language like C# before, often by convention you'll see single letter variable names for loops or for lambda expressions anywhere where the scope is going to be really short, and we do the same thing typically in Lua as well. So let's go ahead and define this function. This function we're going to use to create a superstring. So we're going to create a local variable inside here, and we're going to call this superstring, and we're going to set this equal to a blank table. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say superstring.s equals s. So we're going to have a key on superstring. Remember, this is the same thing as doing this, but we're just going to do the shortcut of saying .s. And so we're going to say whatever string that is passed into this new is going to be the s key for our superstring. This way we can keep track of our string. Then we're going to use this set meta table. This is how we set a meta table for our table. So we're going to say set meta table on superstring equal to meta. That's this meta table here that we haven't done anything with yet. So all this is going to do at this point is it's going to create a new table called superstring in this local variable, and then it's going to set its s key to s, the string that we're going to pass in here, and then it's going to set the meta table for this superstring to meta, which we've defined here in this variable. So then we're going to go ahead and return our superstring. So we can use this now to create an instance of a superstring just by calling new on our superstring and passing in a string. It'll return us back a string. So even right now we could utilize this. So we could do something like this. We could say first name equals, and then we could do ss dot new, and then we could pass in the string Bill, and this would actually create a superstring. It would create a table for us that has that meta table set, and then the string on it, the S key is S. So if we want to test this out, we could say print first name dot S, because it has that S key. Let's go ahead and run that real quick. You can see we get Bill there. Remember, same thing as doing this, and we get Bill again.